Welcome to the Built Right Contractor Podcast, where we talk about business systems, growth strategies, and different things that you can do to make sure that your business is set up to succeed and set up to scale. My name's Brad Akers. Let's get into it. Today, I just want to go through funnels and flywheels. It's something that we've always talked about. It's not like overly new, but this presentation kind of might give you a few more visuals and ways of thinking about it. So that is my hope. Maggie, if you could just man the people joining. All righty. Before we even dive into the funnels versus flywheels part, I want to review things that sometimes I bring up a lot, sometimes I don't bring up a lot, depending on my mood and kind of what streak I'm on content wise. But this, I think, is one of the core pieces of like what I really want to make sure each client, each person who's absorbing our content knows and kind of aims for. These adjectives are what I say it means to be built right. And they really flow. So they build off of each other. In control is you know exactly where your business is headed and how to get there. So what that really means is you know the different variables that are going to get you the outcomes that you want. It doesn't mean that you have full control over your business, but what you can control, you do control. So if you've ever heard someone say, control what you can control, that's what it is. And a lot of the times we need to expand the scope of what we think we can control. And that just comes with a different understanding of how some of these strategies and how some of these things might work. So in control means you know as many of the variables as many of the inputs as possible are controls and not variables, which means you have a group of things that are being done over and over again the same way, so that whatever the variables are, like a salesperson or a the weather out that side, or how you woke up, how you slept the night before, or the person on the other end being a psycho or whatever. You want to know that you at least have a set of controls that has gotten you the outcome that you want, and you can recognize what needs to be changed and what is just the common changing nature of things. So an example is, if you know your process has consistently worked, but then you have 3 people in a row where it just fell flat on, 3 inspections in a row where it just didn't work, you want to be able to look back on, okay, this has worked very well and very consistently in the past. This might just be a fluke. Where if you don't understand the inputs, then you're not necessarily going to be able to know when to change or not change or double down on something or stick with something even when it's hard. This is a way we can kind of know to do that. That will lead to self-sufficiency. So if we know and can control some of these variables, and we know and understand a little bit of what's going on, that makes us a little bit more self-sufficient. That means we are able to control the inputs, and we don't necessarily need someone else to do it. And it also puts you in a situation where your process is driving the growth rather than an individual, or even rather than you, and definitely rather than like an agency or something. That will give you some more predictability. Don't need to really explain that one. And that will give you a deeper foundation that you can really build off of, and that will put you in a position where you're truly scalable and ready to like push, and ready to not necessarily gamble, but make more educated gambles on your business, because you have a lot of things backing up making something more successful or not. So I like to remind you guys, I want to remind you guys of what that means, and what this is because this is what we all should strive for. It doesn't necessarily even just mean a roof. It's not even a roofing thing. It's just a business thing. Every business should work to control as many of the inputs as possible within reason. That will ideally make it so they're not reliant on a bunch of outside factors or people or algorithms. That will give them more predictability, a deeper foundation, and it will make them more scalable. So these are necessary components of pretty much any business. This is something I would say is close to first principles. So now let's talk about how that relates to what we're going through. We've all gone through funnel versus flywheel. We know kind of what that is. But as a quick refresher, on the left side, we have a funnel where you're running ads or you're doing SEO or you're buying leads or even you're knocking doors. And there's usually a cost up here. And then some of those efforts, some of that cost results in leads, some of that cost just goes out into the ether. Some of those leads actually book an appointment. If I know we have some people here who run Facebook ads, we know very clearly, okay, not every lead becomes an appointment. Some of that turns in, some of those appointments even get back to you and make a decision, and then only a few of those become a sale. While the sales and marketing flywheel, the entry point would be a stranger who turns into a prospect, who turns into a customer, who turns into a promoter. The thing that I want to always remind you of is like there's a lot of ways to do this. So we could have the job site being a promotion. We could have the client actually being a promoter by posting about you in a neighborhood Facebook group or telling their friends. We could have a review that they made on a great experience, and we could post that. We could get a video testimonial and run that as an ad. We could show people, hey, this is a client that we worked with that has a similar house and has a color kind of like what you're looking for. Feel free to stop by. We could basically, like, the point that I'm making is there's an endless amount of things you can do. If you've ever heard of Project Map It, that's a good SEO tool. Every single time you do a job, you just pin that address, and it gives you a little bit of like local SEO juice in that area, and it kind of shows people where you've been and where you do work. You could make a project portfolio and do a blog post on every project if you really wanted to be crazy. Like, the point that I'm making is there's a lot of different things. And the reason SEO is actually a compounding strategy, even if it's tough, and I don't necessarily think SEO is as effective in 2025 as it used to be. I think it's harder. But the reason that SEO is a compounding strategy is because every month you do new content, you do new words, and you do new location pages, and you restructure this, and you do new backlinks, and all these things that you're doing are stacking to where eventually that same monthly input is getting bigger and bigger results because you're able to look at what you did in the past and what work you did today, and it all is working for you rather than just something that's more linear. And okay, I spent ads last month, but I stopped spending this month, so I'm not getting sales from it. That's like SEO doesn't necessarily just die like that. So that's part of the way we need to look at it. So we always have talked about the sales and marketing flywheel just in regards to neighborhood marketing and referral processes, which I do believe are the main places to start. But to understand this concept fully and better, you need to think of all the different ways you can use this. And if you want to also kind of think through a good way to look at this, you can look up Naval Ravikant's 4 types of leverage, and that will give you some ideas, because leverage in and of itself kind of insinuates, when you push it towards business, it usually kind of insinuates a compounding vehicle. So those are our terms. We've already covered this, but in this sales and marketing funnel, Facebook ads, SEO, whatever it is, these are cold lead sources. Almost all of them are going to be cold. Even SEO is a cold lead source. It's rare that someone booked on your page because they read every single blog post ever. It's rare that they read your reviews and only your reviews and decided you're the only one they're going to check out. Like, these are cold leads. So there's a lot of unknowns up here, and there's usually a cost. To generate the lead, there's an effort and investment. To turn that lead into an appointment, it's usually effort and time. To turn that appointment into someone who actually says yes or no, effort and time. And then to actually get the job, effort and time. So it's just a high resistance way of approaching things. Doesn't mean it's wrong. And that's part of what I want to talk about on this, is like, there's a time and place for it. We just need to make sure that we're using that properly and we're aware of where we're putting most of our energy and effort, because there is a lot of energy and effort that goes into the sales and marketing funnel process, and we just need to always make sure it's a means to an end. Going back to what we always talk about, sales and marketing flywheels, they multiply your jobs and divide your cost per acquisition. So your costs could also be looked at as the effort and time and the investment to generate these leads. So if we can use that to get invited into the area that we want, and then take it over and then get more referrals, and then some of those referrals turn into new neighborhoods, and then we take them over and get referrals, so on, then that's going to work pretty well. This and this, we need to obsess here. This is not a Brad's process is it, and that's the end all. It's more of a concept that we need to be fully aware of. I have some best practices. I have some mechanized ways to do this, but that doesn't mean that that's it. There's definitely some best practices, but we always want to be looking for more ways to increase our visibility in the areas that we're working in a way that doesn't turn you into just another lead gen person or another roofer. But we do always want to look at that. So like, as you grow, you may get an equipter and a catch-all. You may have a big tent that you put on your job site. You may get cones with your brand on it. You may get a crazy wrapped truck that looks really cool. You may send more mail. You may sponsor a neighborhood baseball team. Like, there's a lot of things that you can do that will help you kind of increase this. So we want to find our areas that we want to work in, and we want to double down. If we know there's a lot of opportunity in the area, there's no end date here. There's no, all right, we're out. We want to keep on pushing. Referrals as well. We want to always ask up front and try to shorten the cycle from someone being happy and doing something that will get you a referral and becoming a promoter for you. Because at the end of the day, right here, this is turning them into a promoter. So that doesn't mean they just have to give you a phone number. It means, how can we make sure that they are actually advertising for us to help kind of create more leverage and a different person that is able to talk about their experience with us, other than us, who's obviously biased, a peer. So that's something we also want to really focus on, is one, how can we make sure that we are getting it right on the front end? Like, how can we get them to become a promoter as soon as possible? But also, we want to keep on asking, keep on pushing, find new ways and new excuses to ask them to do something for you that is a referral generating activity, like what we've talked about. As you grow and as you become bigger and bigger, and as you invest more and more in marketing or whatever, this is going to become more important. So right now it's important because it's one of the most organic ways to grow. So like, if you're newer, okay, this is a really good organic way to grow, and we want to make sure we're getting it right. Eventually, it becomes almost a requirement because from a profitability perspective, you cannot afford generally to grow without a flywheel. So most companies, even if they don't have formal training around it, have a version of this. They might skip this part and be really, really heavy on this part. They might do this, but mostly because of door knocking. They might skip this part, knock doors all the time, but the moment they get a job, they have that completely like kicks off and they're getting jobs all over because they use that first job to get the next. We want to make sure that we have a very intentional and repeatable way, one that matches these adjectives as best as possible. Because this is how you're going to be able to stand. This is how you're going to be the most sturdy and stable business over time. And there's always going to be unstable seasons, to be clear. But in regards to being more and more resilient to those unstable seasons, this is it. This is one of the ways to do it. Sales and marketing flywheels, they're low resistance and they add leverage. They decrease your cost per sale, and that could be monetary costs or even just effort. And they give you the ability to market harder than your competition. So that I think is one of the things that I really want to make sure that we've all had sink in. So if we haven't thought hard about this, I encourage you to. If we know that we're pretty good on the neighborhood marketing stuff, like we see it working, it's validated. We're pretty good on the referral generating stuff. It works, it's validated, and we feel as though like we've really done a good job and mastered kind of getting those outcomes that we want pretty consistently. At that point, we have options. If you're like me, you're going to want to push. Doesn't mean that you have to go be a $30 million a year company, but it does mean that you want to push and you want to make sure that you're able to really get your business to a point where it's growing and it's scaling and you're taking advantage of the fact that you built this machine. And that really looks like this is we have this vehicle, which is the first one we installed, the flywheel, and then we want to install this. Now, installing this, we're going to be less capable generally of having all these adjectives. It'll be harder. We're throwing more unknowns at the whole thing. But in general, once we get here, once we have this as a whole, we're like looking at our net in control, our net self-sufficiency, our net, all that, we're going to generally be pretty fine. So what we want to do now is pour fuel on the fire. We want to spend some money here. We want to spend money on SEO. We want to buy leads, even if the lead source is meh. We want to run ads. We want to try to get as many leads over here as we can so that we can get invited into new areas, take them over, and get referrals, and run them through this cycle over and over and over again. So this flow, funnel to flywheel, is a way to really, really grow a company pretty fast. Without this, this is almost worthless. This can stand on its own, but this might not necessarily grow your business nearly as fast as you want it to. It doesn't mean that you won't grow, but this might be like, okay, we don't have a whole lot going. We're going to multiply what we have, but that takes us from a 2 roof a month company to a 4 roof a month company. And then maybe we're slowly increasing, but it's not that much. If we want to push, this is where we push. And we are able to make that educated gamble if we see this is pretty nicely validated. The way that we make sure this works is we have to know our numbers. So this is where attribution becomes important. we need to know our close rate by lead source. So we need to know, okay, what's our close rate on a referral? What's our close rate on a neighbor? What's our close rate on a Facebook ad? When we are spending money, what's our cost per lead? If we happen to just be like knocking doors, how many doors do we have to knock? Because that's a cost that potentially is detrimental, right? So you could have people who are pissed that you're knocking on their door. So it is a cost. You are risking. This is a little bit of a gamble. So what's our cost? How many doors do we have to knock before we get an appointment? Or how much money do we spend on Facebook before we get an appointment? Or how much money do we spend on Google before we get an appointment? Or how many leads is my SEO getting me a month divided by my management fee? Whatever it is, we need to get clear on these so we can get clear on this, our cost to acquire a customer. Because knowing your cost to acquire a customer will then unlock the best next thing, which is your cost, your lifetime value of a customer to your cost to acquire a customer ratio. And that's where most of the magic really happens. With roofing, this is where it gets more complicated. You cannot just charge more just randomly and expect that to like be a lasting strategy. Now you can definitely charge more, but it doesn't, like, there's a market price that you're not really going to be able to play around with. You have to kind of be within a range. I also don't think that you should just go sell more things to the same person over and over again. It's okay that someone might just buy a roof from you. But what it does mean is we need to get really, really dialed in here, because we need to make this invitation into a neighborhood where this person closes, where there's a good amount of cost. We need to be able to divide that cost by what this invitation into a neighborhood afforded us, which is the neighbors and referrals. So attribution becomes tricky, but what we want to look at is what's our overall cost per acquisition as a company, and then what's our overall cost per acquisition from a channel. So say it costs $2,000 to close a deal on Facebook ads, which is high, but we know we usually get a referral and close those at 80%. And we usually get a neighbor and close that at 50%. And that is really an underwhelming, like I'd like it to be more, but if you spent $2,000 to get a neighbor, or to get a job from Facebook ads, but then you turned that one job into a referral appointment that you closed at 80%. Then you got in front of a neighbor and you closed those at 50%. All of a sudden, you have 130% of the actual cost, or the actual job value, or the average roof. You now have that available to you elsewhere. So in that scenario, you probably are turning one job into another, which cuts your cost per acquisition in two, and we can keep pushing. We can ideally continue to do that over and over and over again, so it goes down and down and down. Getting started is worse than being 6 or 7 months in. You spend $2,000 and you go one cycle, and maybe you get the referrals, maybe you get the jobs, maybe you don't, but it feels still like you're going to just trading money for time, and like, okay, we're working the process, but it's just not as fast as we want. Stick with it, because the more referrals you generate from a person, the more neighbors you get, the more at bats you get, it always is going to drive your cost per acquisition down as long as your closing rates remain stable. So over time, your cost per acquisition should get lower and lower and lower as long as you stick with it. But like I said, it might hurt right when you get started. The first 2 or 3 months might hurt, because the reality of running ads to get clients is not always, but oftentimes it's expensive. Not always, but oftentimes the leads are psycho. And we're dealing with people who are like, I don't even know if I want to close this person, which is a valid thought. So we have to sift through a lot in the funnel to turn it into the flywheel. But that doesn't mean that we don't sift. We just need to understand that we're betting on a pipeline over time, that the ratio of referrals and neighbors, which are the easier ones to close, begin to outdo and begin to get bigger and bigger and dwarf the number of these cold leads that we have to run. And we always want pressure on the system. So that's why we want new reps partially too, because we don't want to be the one who's always dealing with the pressure. Because as long as it's you, you're going to, for the most part, always choose the neighbors and the referral leads over the paid leads. So if you get to a point where you're comfortable with just the pipeline you built and you're doing 100K a month in jobs that are basically just the neighbors and referrals, and like you're able to kind of get some jobs from your Facebook and from your network, and it keeps you busy enough, that's fantastic. With that said, that's not necessarily going to put you in a situation to where you're actually able to scale. In fact, the flywheel can become a trap. All of a sudden, it's just, okay, this is nice. We're going to just keep doing this. And your growth will be much slower than you really want it to be. So when we create pressure on the system and generate these cold leads, we need to pair that usually with like growing our team so that we're able to stack and stack and stack and have multiple of these compounding pipelines being built. Numbers. This is something that is always important, is assume a lead's going to cost you $150. Assume an appointment is going to cost you $250. Assume you're going to close at 25%. Now, until you have real data, these are the types of numbers I would suggest playing with, because we want to be conservative if we're doing like projections based off not real information that we have. The thing is, the $1,000 sale is not really what it costs, especially if you have an agency. Usually, if you have a salesperson, they're going to have that. If you have an agency, they're going to have their management fee that's in there. So we have to figure out how to divide all that and how to make sure that it still is a cost per acquisition that is reasonable. And even if it was 3,000 or 4,000 cost per acquisition, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't run leads or do stuff on that lead source. It just means that there needs to be more and more of an emphasis on the flywheel stuff. Because if you're getting a cost per acquisition at $3,000 or $4,000, unless something's just clearly broken in your process, like your sales process is bad, or and you're not closing deals, or you have the worst agency in the history of agencies and they don't know how to generate leads for you, for the most part, it's safe to assume your results are similar to other people's results, despite appearances. So know that, okay, I'm probably going to get a similar number as everyone else. So if you have that similar number and their cost per sale, which they may or may not be tracking, is 3,000 or 4,000, and yours is 3,000 or 4,000, the way you can beat them is on the flywheel side. And that will allow you to actually progress in a competitive market, even if things are very, very costly. But we just need to make sure that we find what's that cost per acquisition, what's the ratio between our cost per acquisition to our actual like profit margin on a job, on the average job, and then how can we actually work to always be decreasing the cost per acquisition through a flywheel effect. So this is how I like to say it needs to be, especially early on, but really always, is we have to generate the cold leads so that we can move them into the flywheel. And the big thing that we're doing is making sure that while this gets the most attention, while I think most of the processes should be here, we do need a lot of the processes here, from appointment to decision to close deal. So what I mean by that is, like, Aaron's on this call Aaron's running a cohort for us on building out a good sales process and a sales presentation. And what I've seen, I haven't had a chance to be on any of the calls, but what I've seen is he's going all the way to intake, all the way to what happens when the lead comes in. How are we approaching that? How are we turning that lead into a good appointment, not just a like how are we looking at, okay, they're a lead, they're not even an appointment yet, but when we interact with this lead, let's already be focusing on the decision process and the closed deal. And let's make sure that we're seeing above, not just like, oh, you can meet tomorrow, okay, see ya. But instead asking very intentional questions that are kind of establishing your authority and creating a good through line here. So once you have the neighborhood marketing referral processes in place, that's a good time to circle back and really, really, really dive into the sales process and improving your sales skills, and also looking at what are the things we can make as controls in our sales process. How deep can we go? How far back into the journey can we go before we have to let the algorithm take it away? And usually that's, how are we collecting the lead? How much friction is there? Once we have the friction, okay, once we're trying to get a lead and turning it into an appointment, how can we make sure that this process is optimized? After the appointment, how can we make sure that we're getting an answer, ideally as soon as possible? So we need to circle back to that after we've gotten here. The big thing is building repeatable systems around all this. So you guys, the ones here watching, are very aware of this, but build repeatable systems to get more jobs where you're working and more referrals from who you're working with. If you can have these processes in your business and no other processes in your business, but you have these and you follow them, you're probably going to make it. Doesn't mean you're not making your life harder, but I would say these are two of the most important things that you can develop, because this will make all the other stuff less important, frankly. Like, your sales process is still going to be important, but it's not going to be as important because you're dealing with people who already kind of want to work with you. Doesn't mean that you don't need to continue pushing, but it does mean this is a great place to start. So 4 growth engines are the neighborhood marketing processes that we suggest. And I'm going to jump through those. We've already kind of gone through that. And then from referral processes, it's really a matter of getting your everything set up in a way to where we're incentivizing the right things and the referral generating activities, rather than just, hey, we're going to give you money if you give us referrals. So getting them to post about you on social media is usually a great way to do it, and it will just push. And if you can create accessories, like Wabo is a client that I love and it's a good friend of mine, but he also just kind of gets it. And I have a lot of clients that just get it. Wabo does, and they have these little welcome mats that they give after every job. So guess what? That makes it easier. Okay, I just gave you a welcome mat. Now let me take a picture of you with the welcome mat. Hey, use this picture that I just sent of you to go do this. Like, it all of a sudden makes everything easier. So this is like a way they've dialed in their referral process, and so granular to where, okay, what's the easiest way to get a picture of them smiling with our yard sign so that they can have something to post? Well, let's give them something that's a gift that they can pose with. Like, let's use reciprocity there. So building infrastructure around these things are going to increase the value of your business and just increase the value of your time. So the more you have stuff like this in place, the more your time's worth. And ideally, the more you can delegate lower hourly rate activities to other people so that you're able to focus on higher leverage things within your business. And that becomes its own compounding vehicle in and of itself. It helps you make more, empower your team more, and serve more homeowners. So it's all good stuff. That's all I got today. Any questions, Mr. Brian? It was Not a very busy one today, but it's fair.
Hey, that's okay. You guys are out busy. I mean, we're at least where I'm at. Weather's nice. People are working. But no, I no questions here, man. I mean, I've been a part of these calls for a little while. I know, the process and the flywheel and the just all that stuff, and just appreciate the continued education.
Of course. We got more, man. We got more specific stuff, but on this is more like open to the public calls. So
Yeah,
I repeat myself more here than I probably would on a private call with you or in
of
others.
course. Yeah.
Well, cool. I appreciate it. Brian, find a time to talk. Let's text me or something, or find a time on the calendar. Let's book something.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. All
Talk
right.
soon, man. Later.
See you.
It's in.